Hey everyone, this is Jeff Demers, and I just want to tell you a little bit about my backstory. So, about 2013, I was working at the University of Phoenix. I had just graduated with my BSM degree, and I was trying to get a promotion that ended up not happening because there were literally about 500 other employees that were going after that one position. So I didn't get it, which sucked. And about that same time, I knew something had to change because I was living paycheck to paycheck. I could barely afford rent, and I was eating ramen noodles probably 5 or 6 times a week for dinner. Around this same time, a friend of mine was working with a rival school, and they were actually hiring for the same position, but with better pay. So I jumped ship and I went over to that school to work. After starting there, my friend approaches me with this crazy idea about starting up his own media group. And on the weekends, he figured that I could come down and probably do a sports show or my own sports podcast. Now, I had never done a sports podcast before, but I jumped on the opportunity anyways. So I began a sports show that was actually called JD's Rockin' Sports and began laying down podcast after podcast. But the problem was I was getting zero listeners and zero followers. My own family didn't even listen to my show. So I started doing research on how to make a good sports podcast. And one of the articles I came across actually mentioned that you should have athletes come on your show. That led me to researching and looking up how to interview athletes. How to interview athletes actually led me to another article that said how to request interviews with athletes. And in this article, it said you should have your organization's sports director set up an interview through the team's media communications director. This article led me to how to request sports credentials, which again brought up the term sports director. And that's when I realized, hey, we don't have a sports director. So I called up my buddy and he's like, "What's up?" And I said, "I'm the new sports director." He said, "Run with it." So immediately I built a professional looking email, added my name, email, number, and of course, my new official title of sports director. And I started sending out emails and leaving voice messages about how we were a new media group and we're trying to break into that specific market. And to be honest, I probably sent out a few dozen emails and I left at least a couple dozen voicemails saying something like, my name is Jeff Demers. I'm the sports director for our media group. We are interested in covering your team for the upcoming season. Please let me know what it would take to form this new partnership. And then I waited, and then I waited, and then I waited some more. In the next 2 weeks, I received exactly zero callbacks and zero email responses. See, our goal here was to create as many college and professional sports partnerships as possible so we could receive the credentials to cover live events and eventually do interviews before and after the games. And I was really excited about this opportunity to cover games myself and actually talk to some of the local athletes here. And right around the third week, we started getting responses. They were not good. Your organization is too small. We've never heard of you. You don't have the content we require. You don't have the reach that we require, and so on and so on. And here's the other thing. Without these partnerships, we couldn't get the following we needed to attract sponsors to actually make money. It's kind of important. So we were having a hard time getting our foot in the door. And again, I was struggling to create a following, not just for my podcast, but our own brand overall. We had maybe a few hundred followers on all of our social media accounts combined. And again, I was a nobody in the sports media world, but I was a nobody with a title. So then one day, while doing research on how to grow a following, I came across a video with an entrepreneur by the name of Farzana Jafar Jarraj. She was an expert in creating an organic following. So I watched her video, took lots of notes, and immediately began to take action for both my podcast and for our brand on our social media accounts. And within a few months, we had followers in the thousands. At the same time, I began to learn about blogging. syndication, which helped me create the content we needed to start approaching teams again. That's when it happened. One day we got an email back from one of the local professional teams here in Phoenix. They actually offered me a part time, extremely part time credential to cover a handful of games for the upcoming season. Finally, I ended up turning that one credential, believe it or not, to over 80 plus partnerships around the country in just a few years. During those years, I personally covered Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, the PGA Tour, UFC, Bellator MMA, college football. I was on Media Row for the NCAA Men's Final Four. I've covered NASCAR racing and a whole lot more. But then it started to go downhill. One day, I'm reading this book from a guy you may have heard named Russell Brunson. This book is called Expert Secrets. Keep in mind that also during this time, our partnerships were growing, but our income from our sponsors were not. I was putting a ton of time and effort into this. I needed to start making money from this. In Expert Secrets, it discusses how to create an income from your knowledge, from your passion, from your expertise. I saw myself as an expert at building a sports brand. I knew how to make those partnerships. I knew how to get media credentials. I knew how to grow a brand, get eyes on your brand. So, wanting to turn my knowledge into a profit, I decided to create a program called Sports Media X. And I wanted to share it with sports fanatics to help them build their own sports media brand. This didn't go over well at all with my friend. Instead of seeing this as a way to attract other like-minded sports fans to join our media group, he saw this as direct competition. And he did not want me to share this with anyone. But I knew as a servant leader and somebody who needed to make money that it was my duty to share this knowledge. If it could just help someone else create a path in the sports media world for a minimum monthly fee, it would be worth it. So after years of loyalty, I broke away from that media group and a long friendship because I felt this was something I needed to share. Also, I knew that if I was going to tell others they could build from scratch, then I had better be able to start over from scratch as well. So again, I left my media group, I left my position, I left all of my partnerships, and I started over from scratch with the knowledge that I had and a brand new domain. Believe it or not, in just a few short months, I've already created multiple partnerships with local colleges and professional teams, including NASCAR. On top of that, I've already helped a handful of others receive their very first media credentials under their own brand. Most importantly, I've found a much more supportive community along with critical marketing techniques to boost my brand through ClickFunnels, and I am forever grateful for their continuing support. Thanks to them, I've been able to turn my program into an easy to follow online course membership with weekly trainings through our private Facebook group. Here is to a very bright future. Have a great night, everyone.